In Foxhole, Backline logistics players are responsible for gathering and refining raw materials, then crafting the essential supplies that will be taken to the front. These players work behind the scenes, ensuring that a constant flow of supplies is prepared for the war effort. Once supplies are crafted, they are stockpiled in logistical hubs, where frontline logistics players can pick them up and transport them to the front lines. This division of labor between Backline and frontline logistics creates an efficient supply chain. During this video, I'm going to be talking about how to do Backline logistics efficiently. I've created videos on doing midline and frontline logistics if you would like to learn more about those roles. Backline logi is done well in the backline. It's normally the farthest hexes away from the frontline. New players always ask where they need to go to learn how to do logi. I tell every new player to spawn in a logi town. A logi town is normally located in the back hexes and normally has a refinery, factories, a garage, and sometimes a mass production facility. If you don't see any of these icons in a city, then you won't be able to do much backline logi in that area. Let's get into how to do backline logi effectively. First, you will need a truck. You can find trucks in parking lots in the logi towns, or in the seaports or storage depots. If you can't find a truck in any of these places, then you will need to build your own truck. Once you have your truck, you'll want to collect raw materials like salvage, components, or sulfur from resource fields or mines. New players should start with gathering salvage. As you become more experienced, you can start gathering components and sulfur to make higher tiered ammunition, weapons, and vehicles. There are 3 methods for gathering salvage. You can get a hammer and whack at the scrap on resource fields to gather it. You can pull salvage from harvesters like these that are normally located on all resource fields. And the final way is that you can pull salvage from salvage mines that look like this on the map and look like this in the game. I always prefer to gather salvage from mines or harvesters. You can check to see if there's any salvage in mines by looking at the map like this, or you can check harvesters as well by placing your mouse over the field. After you have filled your truck with salvage, you can then take it to the refinery and refine the salvage into basic materials or explosive materials. If you're a new player, I would recommend you just make basic materials for a while before diving into explosive materials. Once your basic materials or B mats have been refined, you can pull the B mats into your truck and take them to the factory. You can use the B mats at factories to make weapons, ammo, medical supplies, or utility items. As a new player, here are my recommendations on what you should produce until you become more experienced. For the small arms tab that has 3 bullets, focus on making 7.62mm ammo and 7.62mm rifles. You can also make 9mm ammo and submachine guns as well. These 2 types of guns are constantly getting used on the front. For the heavy arms tab, I would recommend skipping it until you become more experienced. As you play the game more, you will know what's important to make and what each front needs. I recommend joining frontline battles when you can to learn how weapons are being used. This will help you be a better logi player. I would also recommend skipping heavy ammunition until you have more experience as well. For the utility tab that looks like a wrench, I think the most important items a new player can make are radios, wrenches, and binoculars. These 3 items can be used by many roles in Foxhole and are always needed on a front. Next is the medical tab, which looks like a medical plus sign on its icons. Soldier supplies or shirts would be the most important item to craft on this tab. Shirts are what help soldiers spawn on the front. The second most important item to craft would be bandages. I would recommend only focusing on those 2 items until you become more experienced with medical equipment and start to understand when the other medical items are needed on the front. The final 2 tabs are the resource tab and the uniforms tab. As a new player, I wouldn't worry about these tabs. When crafting, I would also recommend using this logi calculator. You can see how many BMATs you'll need for all the items you want to craft. For example, if I wanted to make 2 crates of 7.62 ammo, 2 crates of rifles, 2 crates of radios, 2 crates of binoculars, and 4 crates of bandages, I would need 980 BMATs in my truck. I'll make sure to leave a link to the logi calculator in the description below. Once your items are done crafting, you can take them to a storage depot or seaport and store them away. You can put them in the public stockpile for anyone to use, or you can make your own private stockpile in case you want to do some frontline logi later, or if you belong to a regiment or a clan, you can place them in their stockpiles as well. And that's the basics for backline logistics. Now let's talk about how to do it efficiently. Backline logi is actually one of those roles that you can do casually. If you only have a few minutes to spare, this is something that you can do at any time. What I would recommend new players do is pick one logi town to spawn in for an entire war. Only focus on doing logi in that one town. This will help you get to know the area faster. When picking a logi town, I would recommend finding a town that has a good logi loop. A logi loop is where you can go from gathering materials, to refining them, to crafting them, and then back to gathering as quickly as possible. Here's an example. In Cannon Smoke and Red River, I can go to the salvage field right next to town, then to the refinery, and then to the factory across the road to start crafting items, and then back to gathering and refining until my items are done crafting. Once crafting is done, I can take them to the seaport to store them, and then I head back to the refinery to grab BMATs, and then I start a new queue of items in the factories. Then it's back to gathering and refining loop until those items are done, and you just repeat this over and over. You normally don't want to go to fields or mines that are far away from the Logi town, unless you have time to spend traveling, or if the nearby resource nodes are already depleted from other players. For this loop, a Logi truck is best because you can use it to pick up the crates from the factories. You can actually break this Logi loop into two different parts if you would like. Part 1 is where you just focus on gathering materials to be refined in the refinery. You can use a loader to gather more materials, or a flatbed with a resource container. You can build up your materials in the refinery and they will stay in the refinery up to 48 hours. Then the next time you log on, you can do part 2. You can focus solely on using those refined materials for crafting supplies at factories and storing them. The main objective of doing this loop is to pump out as many crates as possible. If you get the loop down perfectly, you should be constantly moving the entire time. I find it very relaxing, even though I know some players find it quite boring. One of the best times I had doing Backline Logi was when I was with the 27th on the Warden side. The 27th has a leaderboard for players who make the most crates, who gather the most materials, and who transports the most supplies. This made doing Backline Logi and Frontline Logi really fun. I would highly recommend checking them out if you're looking for a Warden clan. I'll make sure to leave a link to their Discord in the description below. I should note as well, as a Backline Logistics player, you should not be worrying about getting these supplies to the front line. Your only objective is crafting as many supplies as you can. The only time you're doing Backline and Frontline Logistics together is if the front line is in dire need of some item that can't be found in any storage units. Otherwise, these are two different Logi roles that should, in my opinion, always be done separately if you want to do them effectively. I think Backline Logi is one of the best things a solo player can do in Foxhole. For the first 300 to 400 hours I played, all I did was different variations of this Logi loop, and always just put all my supplies into public storage. And as I mentioned before, it's really casual and you can jump on it anytime, even if it's only for 10 or 15 minutes. Here are also a few other random Backline Logi tips. As a new player, I would not recommend using mass production facilities. If you want to focus on making important supplies that fronts need, then make all your items in factories until you become more experienced. Factories produce your items faster and work better for the Logi loop that I explained. When you become more experienced, you will want to use the mass production facility when making items and vehicles with what we call refined materials. You will get a discount on what you make, and this will help you make more with your refined materials. But again, that's for when you become a more experienced player and know what to build. My next tip is to do Logi in the same town as much as possible. I know I already mentioned this before, but I can't stress it enough how much faster and better you get at doing Logi if you have done it in the same area multiple times. I think I spent my first 200 hours only playing in Callum's Cape doing logistics. I got so familiar with the hex I never had to check the map to know where I was going. My final tip is to commend your fellow Backline Logi players as much as you can. When doing Backline Logi, you get a ton of commends to give to other players when you craft items. Making items in factories is one of the fastest ways to get commends to give out to other players in the game. If you do the Logi loop correctly, you can easily rack up 30 to 50 commends to give out in about an hour. Commends max out at 100, so make sure you give them to other deserving Logi players in the backline. I'm almost the Brig rank at about 1600 hours. I feel like my rank is boosted because of Backline Logi. Backline Logi players are constantly commending one another. Overall, when you focus on Backline Logistics, you support the larger war effort by ensuring a steady flow of resources and supplies to the front. Keep making supplies and keep those frontline logistics players busy delivering them. This has been a quick guide on Backline Logistics. I know I didn't go through every button press or anything like that. If you want more specifics on the UI and what buttons you need to press, then I would recommend checking out Freeric's guides. Freeric does a great job of going in depth on every single key you need to press to make things work. I will leave a link to Freeric's guides in the description below. If you have any questions, you can of course leave them in the comments section as well, and I would be happy to answer them. Vet Foxhole players, feel free to leave your Backline Logistics tips in the comments as well. Myself and a group of Foxhole players are also building a mentoring program to help new players learn the game. If you want to be a mentor or learn something about Foxhole, feel free to join my Discord. I will leave a link in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching and for your support. Make sure to subscribe for more Foxhole content. Keep those Logi supplies coming. Cheers.